Well, all right. Dr. Smith gave me the most exciting topic he could think of with APA's format or citations for your prepared speeches. So, I have a few resources that I could also, after this, I'll email out, or if they want to put some of them on the FFA website, at least the ones that I'm not violating copyright laws on, we can do that. And otherwise, it's kind of informal, ask questions as we go. I have the opportunity to, I guess, judge these speeches this year for state. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. And Eric sent out this earlier. So we're kind of going to speak to the state rubric. And really we're going to focus on, if I can get the right one to show up here. These two areas, quality resources, and then APA style for references and citations. So the only thing I'll really have to say about quality resources is things that you probably already know. Just be careful, especially with things that are online. And we all know the misinformation that's available out there. My advice is if you find information that looks really, really good and you want to use it in your speech, try to find that same piece of information somewhere else, or maybe even two other places, do triangulation of your information before you hang your hat of being a main point of your speech. Obviously, depending on the sources. As far as websites, often the .edu, .org websites tend to be a little bit more reliable, as well as the .gov, especially if you're looking at USDA statistics and things like that. So what I'm going to look for when I'm assessing your manuscripts and quality resources is just that. Where are these sources? I'm just going to look at the references. What are they? I'm going to look for a variety of sources. I like to see variety of sources, meaning that more than just websites, more than just the same types of websites, meaning citing more than just your local newspaper 5 or 6 times. Some pretty basic ideas like that. So if you have any questions about the quality of resources, feel free to ask. But I think the main idea for this afternoon, real quick, is talk about APA style for references and citations. So when Eric first asked me to do this, I had not looked at the rubric, and we were going. I was at first under the assumption that we're talking about APA style as far as through the entire manuscript, and as he was telling me about the variety that you'll see if you look at National FFA's sample manuscripts, and so this is also the same rubric they use. So we're not going to talk about APA style. We can talk about a few things when the sample manuscript that I open up in a few minutes. But in general, all I'm going to look for by the rubric is style for references and citations. Now, I am well aware that APA is nitpicky and sometimes annoying. I deal with it quite a bit with what I do here at LSU. But so I've tried to put together some handy hints that I'll be willing to share with y'all. This will open up. So the first thing that I want to share with you all is the APA manual is by far your best source of information. If you don't have one or don't want to buy one, the next best thing, and there are a few things that aren't quite right, but I don't think it's anything that's going to necessarily detriment your speeches, is Purdue University has an online writing laboratory. You're probably familiar with this. It's probably as close as we can get without actually having an APA manual. I am not a fan of software like EndNote, for example, where you can enter in your information from your sources and it supposedly creates citations for you. They are almost always not quite right. And I can usually pick those out pretty quick from assignments that are turned in here at LSU. So I would caution against using software like that. So the first thing that I'll look for is, as I read the manuscript for references, will be the in-text citations. And so you see there, the general guidelines is with the new version of APA, the 6th edition, the date that the source was published should accompany the citation every time you use it. It used to be you cited with the date once, would be like Smith 2010, and then every time after that you could just put Smith in parentheses. That's not the rules anymore. If a date is not available on your source, you use ND, N period, D period, like I show right here. And you'll use that every time you cite that non-dated source.
Can you maximize your document so we can read it?
I can try. Is that better? I'm sitting in front of like a 60-inch screen, so you might have to tell me what it looks like. So that's the top of it. Is that better, Eric? Okay, we'll assume it is. A lot of this document, I'm trying to follow the rules of APA, and I realize that there are some things here that you all probably won't use when you write speeches, but just in case, we're going to talk about it anyway. So in-text citations, the first time that your students are citing their source, all authors' last names plus the date are listed. Up to 6 authors. If there's 7 or more, you're going to use what we call ETAL et al. As the first mention. Probably, like I said, not going to be very common at all. So here, I've also tried to put some examples for in-text citation. If you want to start your sentence with the citation, for example, here we have Blackburn, Robertson, and spelled out A-N-D, Lamb, and the year in parentheses. If you're going to put them at the end of the sentence, same sentence, Blackburn, Robinson, and Lamb, comma, 2014. And take note, we're going to be APA is pretty specific on the exact format of these citations. And one thing I'll look for is the placement of commas and other punctuation marks. So comma after each last name, even in between the ampersand and the name there. Afterwards, if you're going to cite a source with 3 or more authors again in text, you use et al. You can do the same thing. We can use et al. At the beginning of the sentence. There's no comma after the period and then the date. If you want to put at the end of the sentence, it'll be Blackburn et al. Period, comma, date. That's your basic format for in-text citations. The next, and I tried to hand-pick things in the APA manual that I thought would be most relevant. So quotations might be something that you want to add emphasis in parts of your speech. Use quotations according to APA. This is the way it would look if it's a short quotation, that's 39 or fewer words. Quotation marks around what you're exactly quoting, P period, and the page number. If you want to use the quote, put the citation at the end of the sentence. Should actually be 2014 right here. The way that would look if you want to use your quote. I doubt that you're going to want to use a block quotation in your speech, but if you did, a block quotation is more than 40 words. You do not use quotation marks. It's indented, and the page number goes at the end if you're going to lead with the citation. You would put the citation in the parentheses, just like the one above, if you're going to use a block quote. Again, I'm not sure I would encourage you to have a 40-word quote in one of your speeches. If a quote, even if it's a small quote, happens to span more than one page, use PP period, and then your numbers of all-inclusive pages. Some sources may not have page numbers. If that's the case, that happens a lot of times when we're citing different websites. cite the paragraph number. Don't cite the page number if you print that source off. Don't cite the page number that your printer printed off, even if your printer automatically puts page numbers. They've got that. That was directly, I actually read that last night in the APA manuals. That's directly from APA. Indirect sources, so they're all direct sources. We're quoting that exact source. If you find a piece of information that really helps your speech, but you can't find the original source, it's okay to a point to use indirect sources. So you can see this sentence here. At one point I found that sentence cited in another paper, but they had taken the website down, so you couldn't find that exact article. So you have an example of a no date, so the National Education Association, the NEA, no date as cited in Walker Garden Kitchell 2014, page 1. So that's where that's quoted from the Walker Garden Kitchell article. And when we get to the reference page in a minute, this is what you would include in the reference page, because this is what we're actually citing, not the NEA. You may have your students interview someone and want to include that as a part of a personal communication. That's perfectly fine. You'll want to give us a little information on who the person is that gave the personal communication, just so that the speech has the context and the document has the context. And then you would list it just like this. First initial, last name, personal communication, and then the date that you received that personal communication. A little bit more on in-text citations. This is, I've scanned out of the APA book. They have a lot of rules, so this kind of just sums up everything I tried to go over. The one thing I want to point out, if you're going to use more than one source, again, I don't know if you'll do this in your speeches, but if you use more than one source to support a main point, make sure they're ordered alphabetically within the parentheses. Any questions about the in-text citations?
They're working on that they could show on their screen and ask any specific questions. This would be an opportunity for that. If any of you teachers, all you do is push show screen on your screen.
You can type questions, ask questions if you have a microphone. This is about the in-text. I have a little bit more information. I'll talk about the reference page in a couple of minutes. I want to make sure we're all okay with the information I'm going over as far as the basic style in-text. Try to go back and look. I can't see I don't know how to find if there's like type any questions. So if there is, somebody needs to let me know. Okay, well, I'll move quickly to the reference page section. So that last page, you should have reference, not page, just references centered and bolded, I believe, is the way that should look. And they should be alphabetized by the author's last name. The first line is flush left, and then every line afterwards is indented half an inch. That's easily done in the Word function of the topic that shows the ruler, which I can see one online right now. A common mistake is capitalizing too many letters within the title of the work. You only capitalize the first letter of the first word of the title, and then the first letter of the word if there's maybe a colon or a question mark within the title. So a letter of the first letter of the word that follows a punctuation mark. I try to include examples here of citations that you may actually run across. So if you have a scholarly journal, this is the citation for the example I was using up above. So you have authors with their initials identified, the year, not italics. Here's the title of the article itself. The journal is italicized. There's a comma. We're still italicizing. This is the volume of the journal. Issue number 4 in parentheses is not italicized. Page numbers of the entire article And if it has a DOI number, it should be included. A DOI is I think it's a digital object identifier. It's basically a code for each journal article if they are indexed. Not all are going to have that, but if you're citing a journal article, like a research journal, check this to make sure. If it does not have a DOI and you retrieve it online, simply type retrieve from and copy and paste the URL from the top of your internet browser. If it is, you actually have a paper copy of the journal, you would stop right here after the page number and there'd be no DOI if you have a hard copy. If you're going to cite an actual physical newspaper, this is the way it would look. The reporter's last name, then initial, the year the article was written, followed by the day, month, then day, title of the work that's not italicized, and we italicize the title of the newspaper, and then we put the page number. So this article would have been split over 2 pages, at page A1, A4. If you're citing an online article, this is the way you do it. So there's a reporter, the day the article was published, not the day you accessed it, the day the article was published, the title, and then retrieve from. And there's the link to that advocate article that I'm citing there. If you're going to cite a book, there's some different ways to cite books. If it's just a regular book that you've got in your hands, a hard copy, so this is, let's say, very similar, last name of each author, year, we italicize the title of the book, and we put the location it was published, and then the publisher. So there's the city and state, and then the publisher. If it was a book that you got online, there's author, year, italicize the title, retrieve from. You may find an edited book. If you're citing the entire edited book, like in its entirety, just saying that there was a book published about preparing and advancing agriculture teachers, you cite the whole book. So you do that. There's the editor's last names, followed by EDS period, close parentheses period, the year. And then again, the title in italics, the location, and the publisher's name. If you're only going to cite one chapter within that book, you would cite the author of that chapter. There's the title of the chapter, and then you put in, and now this is a little bit different. We put the first initial before the last name of the editors, still italicize the title of the book, taking note that we're only capitalizing still the first letter of the first word. You may want to cite government reports. I was reading this one today, so if we're going to cite this report about cattle inventory, you put the title of the government agency. Those here, the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The year was published, 2017. There's the italicized title of this report. Most of our government reports have some sort of identifier number. If it does, you see it, you're supposed to put it right behind the title, and there's where I retrieve that article. You may cite something like a podcast, which that's perfectly fine if it's a legitimate podcast. So here's one that I found from USDA today. So there's the podcaster last name, the date it was published, the title in italics. See, here's the example of, we have the first letter capitalized, we have a punctuation mark with a colon, and then rice is harvested, or rice is capitalized, and the rest are not. Put in brackets audio podcast and retrieve from. There are many pages of example citations within the APA manual, and I was trying to only pick out the few that I thought might be most useful. So that's what I have for the reference page. The big idea is, again, everything is alphabetized by the author's last name, and making sure, depending on the type of citation, whether you're only including the year or you're including the year and the day, month and day it was published. I don't know that the APA really has a rhyme or reason for some of this, like why this report doesn't have a month and day, because it was reported on the article or the report that I was looking at, but according to APA, we don't put the month and day there. That's why I said I think it's pretty good practice to have an APA manual. They're like, I think they're for like $25 on Amazon. but the Purdue OWL, we can go look at that if y'all want to. But that's pretty much what I'm going to be looking for when I go through these speeches. I'm going to look to make sure that the in-text citations are present, especially when I'm reading the manuscript itself. If it sounds like you're paraphrasing a pretty important statistic, that should be cited. If it's an idea that's obviously not the student's, it should be cited. So I think to kind of show what I'm talking about there, I'm going to try to minimize, get rid of these. I'm going to open up this one. It's not right. That's not what I want. So this is one of the examples from last year. It's from Texas. So this is what I was talking about as far as APA formatting. True APA formatting talks about this running head. Our rubric and the national rubric says nothing about the actual APA format of the manuscript. If you're going to do this, though, my message is get it right. So the running head should look like this. It should actually say running head, colon on the first page, and then technically it should probably have stopped right here. You only put the first few words of the title in all caps right here, and then your next page, your all caps without the actual words running head. My advice to you all is just don't put a running head. And then you don't have to worry about getting it right. Because looking at a rubric, I really don't care if there's a running head. As far as the abstract, I'm going to get down to the meat of the speech. So this is an example of a block quote, and technically it's wrong. It should be single spaced, but it is tabbed over 1/2 of an inch, and they have it cited here, but it also doesn't have any kind of page number, so it should have that. So that's, even the national manuscript here isn't 100% correct, but I was pointing that out. But as far as the way to see the in-text citation, so they have this sentence here that's obviously not the student's own thoughts, and they have that cited. When we use the ampersand in parentheses, and then the words AND if you have the citations out in the sentence. Other than that, this is except for the not having the page numbers, this Texas manuscript is a pretty good example of the mechanics of citing APA format in text. I actually didn't look at the reference page, so I can tell you, I'll look real quick to see what I think of that. That one's pretty right. I'm just looking at it, assuming these are all in alpha order, which it looks like. But in general, that looks right. The top line is flush left. Every line below that is indented over. So that's kind of just the basics of what I'm going to look for as far as the mechanics of APA citations. And then if I was sitting here, if I was judging this manuscript, I would kind of take an overview of what the citations are. Things like the Washington Post, or the Wall Street Journal, I mean, that's a pretty legitimate newspaper. The Texas Tribune, I'm assuming that's probably an okay newspaper. It's kind of just in good practice to stay away from anything that might be interpreted as not credible. The things like the Wikipedia, some people say it's accurate as anything other encyclopedia. I'd shy away from that. I've seen manuscripts in other states where they're citing Google. We're not citing Google. You use Google as a search engine, so cite the manuscripts or the sources that you find from your Google source, not Google itself. Citing I would also, kind of shy away from citing just a website if you can. APA honestly doesn't have a good way to cite just a website. So there's a little bit of up to interpretation there, which is why I purposely did not include it. So it's just not clear within APA how to do that. They have some suggestions on Purdue's OWL, and those will probably get you by. What else do I need to talk about? So what questions do we have? That's just the mechanics of APA. Eric, is there anything you need me to hit on?
Does anybody have any questions or examples? Anything they've run into?
I'll send some of these documents over to FFA office, and we can get some of them online that aren't that things that I created that aren't copyrighted. If anybody wants, the scan of the APA manual or any of those APA manual pages, I'll send you those individually. They're just, you can't publish that online since I'm scanned it from the book.
I think that covers it. Dude, I've been
not the most exciting topic to talk about on a Wednesday afternoon, but that's pretty much is what it is. That's what I'm going to look for.
Well, we're going to judge those 8 papers coming in, and maybe some of the folks in this room will have one of those students. Obviously, this will be a valuable recording because we can archive it and send people here to kind of see what to look for. And my goal is not to have 1,000 questions the week of January 10th come through the FFA office and to have answered those questions preliminarily or ahead of time. So yeah. Thanks a lot. I think we got this one recorded. It looks like the recorder didn't kick out this week, so we'll be able to archive this one, put it on the YouTube.
Yeah, I saw it pop up.
For sure. So I appreciate you, Dr. Blackburn, helping us out tonight.
No problem. If anybody out there has any questions, feel free to give me a call or email or whatever.